When I ask if he feels angry with himself for taking benzodiazepines, his daughter jumps in. This also didn't happen. You can listen to the interview. Jumps in, arms waving, hold on, and tries to bring the interview to a close. Here's a clip.
Is there anybody of you that's angry with yourself for taking benzodiazepines when now that you know how dangerous they are?
I wouldn't say angry. It's not like I failed to see the irony. And that was another thing about this that made it still continues to make it difficult to stomach. You know, should have I known better?
I'm Mikhaila Peterson. This weekend, the Sunday Times released a hit piece on my dad, Jordan Peterson, and me. And it wasn't just in their magazine, it was the front cover. I was focused on in there to an uncomfortable degree. That article has led to other articles, and now we have the media all over the world telling everyone my dad has schizophrenia. Turns out the entire mainstream media is basically a tabloid now, which you'd think I'd have already known. Dad does not, just to be clear, and has never had schizophrenia. He had akathisia, which is a very deadly and severe side effect of some psych medications, and originally started with benzodiazepines used to treat insomnia and depression associated with an autoimmune disorder. He does not have akathisia anymore, and he's been off the meds, benzodiazepines, since January 4th, 2020, that were causing it. So if you're worried about him, he's okay now. He's doing better than he's done in 2 years. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to produce podcasts with Matthew McConaughey, Russell Brand, etc., and plan book events in March. So that schizophrenia story is a complete lie used to discredit him by the mainstream media, and it's been really quite hard on my family over the weekend, and it's still spreading. We decided as a family to talk about akathisia because people don't understand it and it's a dangerous condition, and we thought if we spoke about it, maybe other people could avoid the hell that nearly killed my dad and the hell my whole family experienced in the last 2 years. My dad has written an email response that he sent to the Times, and I've linked it below. It's on his blog. He has no interest in addressing the press situation by video, and honestly, it would be a waste of his time. But I wanted to explain what's going on, and I'm pretty angry about it. So first, why'd we even do the interview with the Times? Clearly, it was a mistake. We originally decided to do the Times interview because Dad's publishers suggested it. The Times had been reaching out for about 6 months, and because we were invited with this super polite email. I'll post it up, but here it is. I hope you're well. I don't think we've worked together before. I'm a commissioning editor at the Sunday Times magazine in London. I wanted to get in touch about a potential interview when the time is right with your father, Jordan Peterson. We've been following his story closely over the past weeks and hoping that he's doing better. It's such an exhausting, uncompromising virus. This was sent in August after we had COVID. It must be an incredibly stressful period for you all. When the time feels right, we would love to send one of our writers to speak with him for the magazine. I like to think we tell difficult stories with generous space, time, and objectivity. We run long-form features, telling the whole story, rather than short, flashy headlines. The headline they published was, Jordan Peterson on his depression, drug dependency, and Russian rehab hell. The interview would cover his life and career to date, family life, illness, recovery, and upcoming plans and projects for the future. It would allow you to clear up any factual inaccuracies that might have been reported in the press, telling his side of the story, as well as celebrating his life and career so far. Let me know what you think. I've attached some interview examples here so you can get an idea of what it might look like. It would be great to talk. Best wishes. So I sent that email over to the Penguin publicists to vet. The Times came off as totally reasonable to them, and they thought it was a great idea, and we set it up for January. We figured perhaps if we got the health aspect out of the way, then when his book Beyond Order is published March 2nd, we won't have to deal with health questions anymore given it's in the past. However, things went completely sideways. They wanted serious details about the health experience. Now, Dad and I did a podcast in July detailing the journey in detail. We decided I should describe what had happened because I was there the whole time. I was with him throughout it, and I remember it. But much more importantly, it's absolutely miserable to go over, and Dad's feeling better, and I didn't want some journalist poking him about things they don't understand. I wasn't supposed to be part of the article. I was just supposed to give details. I was just supposed to recount the health aspect of the last year. I told the journalist specifically. So I'll give you the brief story. I've recounted it a whole bunch of times every time we get a new doctor. So I'll give you the background, and I wanted to do it because my dad he's still not fully recovered. He's probably not going to be fully recovered for another year, to be honest. And he's still extremely prone to anxiety. And so any recounting of it knocks him out for a couple days. Dad was hoping, I don't know what the article is going to be like. He's hoping it's not going to focus entirely on health. I said that I read the other stories and some of them were pretty health focused. So we'll see what he says tomorrow because he's trying to, get past this. But we thought if people understood what happened and the reasoning behind things, then we could just let it be. It's like, this happened. Don't do some of these things. And if you are on these medications, like especially psych meds, and you're akathesic, and you weren't before, maybe look at the meds, right? But people don't know about it. And there are some docs, some specialists out there that can help if you know what the problem is. But yeah, ideally, we'll just leave this be, and then Dad can go back to touring and writing and doing podcasts and being controversial, and we can not deal with health for a while. It was like my entire life. But yeah, reach out if you have any questions.
Brilliant. Mikhaila, thank you very, very much.
Hey, thank you.
Thanks.
We didn't want to talk about his health too much. We didn't really want that to be a huge focus. We wanted to get past it. However, I'm skeptical of mainstream media, clearly not enough. So I recorded the entire interview Dad did and the one I did, and they're up completely unedited on my dad's channel right now. It's just the audio, unfortunately. It's called Unedited Peterson Times Interview. However, it's 3 hours long and has no video, and this press disaster needs to be addressed, I think. So I'm going to go through the Times article now and tell you guys where the mistakes are. We can compare to what was said in the actual interview as well. Jordan Peterson on his depression, drug dependency, and Russian rehab hell, the superstar psychologist, scourge of snowflakes, and his daughter Mikhaila explain how he unraveled and their bizarre journey to find a cure. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's really long, but I'll read the really spicy parts. I thought this was going to be a normal interview with Jordan Peterson. After speaking with him at length, and his daughter for even longer, I no longer have any idea what it is. I don't know if it's a story about drug dependency or doctors or Peterson family dynamics or a parable about toxic masculinity. Whatever else it is, it's very strange. Okay, so far that's not too unreasonable. It is very strange. Then she goes in to describe who Dad is, a clinical psychologist, a conservative superstar of the culture wars, born and raised in Alberta, spent the first 3 decades of his career in relative academic obscurity, turning out papers and maintaining a small clinical practice. All that changed in 2016. Practically overnight, the Toronto professor became a YouTube sensation, posting videos and lectures attacking identity politics and political correctness and dispensing bracing advice about how to be a real man. So I haven't read this entire article all the way through because I was really upset over the weekend, and every time I read it, I cried. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not a particularly sensitive person, and this was really upsetting. So this is the first time reading it all the way through. So hopefully I don't get too emotional. His 2018 self-help bestseller, 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, has made him arguably the world's most famous, and certainly its most controversial public intellectual. I don't think that's right. I don't think it was the book. It was actually the media and a couple of interviews that made him the most controversial public intellectual, given the fact, if you actually listen to him, he's not very controversial. So then you guys can read it. You have to read this article. She goes on to talk about Kathy Newman on Channel 4. Okay, so she goes after the Kathy Newman debate, obviously, and then goes, if his rise to fame was dramatic, what has happened since he disappeared from public view 18 months ago sounds fantastical. In his daughter's words, it's like a horror movie. It was like a horror movie. It's been like 2 years of a horror movie, but, don't have any sympathy for that. A movie in which her father gets hooked on benzodiazepines. That's one way of putting it. Or you can say formed a dependency because that's what those drugs do. Became suicidal. Misses the akathisia part. He didn't just become suicidal. He had a akathisia caused by the meds. And is hospitalized and then diagnosed with schizophrenia. So that's what the mainstream media is picking up on. The reason we pulled him out of the hospital, which we've made clear in the podcast, is because when no one would diagnose him with akathisia because the doctors didn't know what was going on. So he was misdiagnosed multiple times. Misdiagnosed. When we finally found a competent doctor, he was diagnosed with akathisia, which is what I tried to make clear in the interview, because lots of people with akathisia are misdiagnosed and it kills them. So that's what happened to my dad. He never had schizophrenia. Okay. Oh, this is good too. Against his doctor's advice, the one that misdiagnosed him, just the random doctor that misdiagnosed him, she flies him to Russia to be placed in an induced coma. He emerges delirious, unable to walk, and ricochets from one rehab center to another, ending up in a Serbian clinic where he contracts COVID-19. Okay, because people don't know the story. We went to hospitals in Canada and then the US and then back in Canada before we went to Russia, because obviously we were trying to stay in the North American healthcare system. And you guys should listen to the interview that we actually did. Actually, I'll put a clip up.
Well, this is, obviously I've talked to various people about this, and everyone says, why on earth would a high-profile North American...
I went to the best treatment clinic in North America in Connecticut, and all they did was make it worse. We were out of options. We were out of options. The judgment of my family was that I was likely going to die in Toronto. And so there was no...
die in Toronto. Again, I mean, lots of people would say, why would you sort of trust the judgment? Although your family members love you, they're not trained, qualified medics. Why would you put yourself in their hands and not the medical profession's hands?
I had put myself in the hands of the medical profession. And the consequence of that was that I was going to die. And we put ourselves in the hands of medical professionals in Russia too. So it wasn't like we were completely fleeing from the medical profession. I tried a slow taper on the benzodiazepines and I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And I went to the treatment clinic on the Eastern Seaboard, and they had promised essentially a 12-week treatment program. And my impression of that was that at the end of that 12-week period, I would be free of benzodiazepines. Mm-hmm. But that isn't how it worked out at all. And I was on more medication when I left that treatment center than I was when I went in.
When I ask if he feels angry with himself for taking benzodiazepines, his daughter jumps in. This also didn't happen. You can listen to the interview. Jumps in, arms waving, hold on, and tries to bring the interview to a close. Here's a clip.
Is there anybody of you that's angry with yourself for taking benzodiazepines when now that you know how dangerous they are?
I wouldn't say angry. It's not like I failed to see the irony. And that was another thing about this that made it still continues to make it difficult to stomach. Should have I known better? Possibly.
Well,
I mean, I did do my thesis on alcoholism, although,
this is, hold up.
Yeah.
You had a side effect from a medication. Should you have known better that benzodiazepines can cause akathisia in people who take SSRIs?
No.
You didn't have it like this. This wasn't benzodiazepine dependency problem. This was an akathisia side effect from psych meds.
Right.
So like, let's
yes,
not,
and
like,
no, I couldn't have known that. Yes, that's right. Thank you.
I have to say, we have 10 minutes before we have to wrap up.
Yeah, I'm doing okay, by the way.
Yeah, I know, but still, or mom will kill me. If this was a movie, its director would unquestionably be the 28-year-old Mikhaila Peterson. I'm 29, but who cares about facts? CEO of her father's company. At least they don't say I do paid consultations, which they just stuck in the original copy and also isn't true. She and her husband appear to have assumed full charge of his affairs, so before I'm allowed to speak to him, I must first talk to her. I wonder why someone who wrote this article wouldn't be allowed to talk to him directly. 'Cause you're a human spider. Oh, I see. She just doesn't like me because she doesn't like the way I look. Unrecognizable from the ordinary-looking brunette from photos just a few years ago, Mikhaila today is a glossy, pouting, Barbie blonde and talks with a zealous, spiky conviction of a President Trump press spokeswoman. Ah, okay, this is getting better. According to her website, she has suffered from juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune disorder since early childhood, which necessitated a hip and ankle replacement at 17. Okay, according to my website. No, I'm faking it, man. I'm faking it. You got me. Needless to say, the medical profession does not... Why are we even on my meat diet? Honestly, I shouldn't even be in here. I don't know why they're mentioning that I look like a Barbie, but I like to take care of myself. What can I say? Barbie hair is getting in my eye. Needless to say, the medical profession does not endorse this diet. Nevertheless, in 2018, her father adopted it, and within months declared it had cured his depression, anxiety, psoriasis, snoring, gingivitis, gastric reflux, and even the floaters in his right eye. Right eye. Just one eye. I don't know where these people are coming up with this. He stopped taking the SSRI antidepressants he'd been on for 14 years and proclaimed he was intellectually at his best. That's when he went on tour. He was in really good shape. Like every medical autodidact, glad you can use fancy words, I've ever met, Mikhaila rattles off pharmacological jargon at 100 miles an hour. Just because she doesn't know what she's talking about doesn't mean I don't. Sweeping from one outlandish tale to another, wow, with breathless melodrama that becomes increasingly exhausting to follow. She wants to give me the nitty-gritty, nasty details. Yeah, I wanted to do this. This was like the fun part of my day, of the past 18 months herself, because Dad is still not fully recovered and he's extremely prone to anxiety, so any recounting of the story knocks him out for a couple of days. One true thing. After 80 minutes on Zoom, the one thing of which I'm certain is that were I as close to death as she assures me your father repeatedly was, this is not the person I would entrust with saving my life. Well, that's fine. I wouldn't be helping anyway. I was trying to explain akathisia caused by psych meds that kills people so that it doesn't kill other people, or to try to stop that from happening. By early 2019, Peterson was a household name, his book a global bestseller. When disaster strikes, his wife of 30 years, Tammy, was diagnosed with kidney cancer. We did a whole bunch of research, and it was this extremely rare cancer that is extremely deadly. We didn't just do the research. They diagnosed her with the deadly cancer, and they told us, and then we did research. So it wasn't like, just in case. That needs to be clarified. Tammy suffered all kinds of surgical complications, and Peterson spent months at her hospital bedside, terrified she would die. That summer, the doctor raised his benzodiazepine dose, but instead of soothing him, it seemed to only make matters worse. Dad started to get super weird. It was manifested as extreme anxiety and suicidality. That's the akathisia. If you guys know of anyone who starts a medication and gets panic and suicidal, it's probably the medication. There's something called akathisia. It's not good. Frightened he would kill himself, Peterson transferred to a public hospital in Toronto in November, where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. That's not what I said, and that's not what happened. Akathisia makes people suicidal. It's this crawling feeling that's so bad. You can see people on YouTube trying to describe it. It's a crawling sensation that makes you not want to stop moving. And so it's commonly misdiagnosed as schizophrenia because They don't know what it is. And in order to treat schizophrenia, you get put on psych meds, and that causes worsening akathisia. He was hospitalized in December. And a doctor there said it could be bipolar, maybe it's schizophrenia, we should use ECT. And Dad and our family said no, because obviously that's not the problem. So this is what she writes. It's not like we're uneducated. This is me, according to her. It's not like we're uneducated in these things, right? She says. We kept telling them no, the problem was his medication, but they wouldn't listen to us. So we started calling rehab clinics around the world. We rang 57 of them. I don't say rang. And this one place in Russia said, yeah, we do detoxes. So we thought, what do we do? It's got to be dangerous because no one else will do it. But my family agreed, let's give it a shot. Yeah, that's not exactly what happened. Wow. The Toronto doctors were not okay with it. We had to sign papers taking responsibility for whatever happened, and they were annoyed about it enough that they wouldn't even give us his discharge papers, which is not even legal. It was a complete mess. Okay, explanation time. We pulled him out because they misdiagnosed him, and we went to get a competent doctor that fixed him. Sorry that that doctor was in Russia. It still worked. And then the center we used in Serbia was a neurological rehab center, and it's one of the best ones in the entire world. People don't understand that there's a world outside of North America. At least this lady doesn't. She's so mad at me. So you guys have probably seen the podcast, and if you haven't, the podcast we did about this, because it's over, but she recounts the whole thing. Mikhaila contacted a clinic in Serbia. We'd already met with a head doctor there, by the way. So it wasn't just like I randomly contacted a Serbian clinic. This, like, top-of-the-world private hospital, and flew her father to Belgrade, where he was diagnosed with akathisia. There we go. A condition of restlessness classically linked to benzodiazepine withdrawal. No, it's classically linked to psych meds. Finally, Mikhaila had found doctors who corroborated her own theory. That's actually partly true. I did find doctors who corroborated my own theory, and the theory was right. It was akathisia. Didn't she record this? By now my head is spinning. The blizzard of obscure pharmaceutical terminology keeps on coming as Mikhaila reels off the names of more antibiotics, fluoroquinolones, and antidepressants and antipsychotics prescribed to her father, recounting her objections to this one, and that one, it all becomes a blur. I was being recorded. How is this a blur? The long and short of it is that late last year, Peterson flew home to Canada. His akathisia, the intense agitation and restlessness that makes him and everyone else who experiences it suicidal, has improved significantly but not disappeared. It's disappeared now. No one can understand why it still plagues him. That's also not true. Okay? It takes a while to go away after you have that kind of effect. It's like, it's a delayed effect, takes a while to recover from it. That's in the medical literature if you're smart enough to read it. Having gone through several more doctors in Toronto, Mikhaila is currently corresponding online with thousands of akathisia sufferers who are telling me what worked for them. I had thousands of people email me after we released videos about Dad having akathisia saying, you know, I hope you guys get through it. It almost killed me, or I lost somebody to it, and telling me what worked for them because doctors don't really know how to deal with it. So I was collecting information because I was worried my dad was going to die. Has she ever, I wonder, felt perceived by, like, why is this article about me? Has she ever, I wonder, felt perceived by the medical profession as the problem? Felt perceived by the medical profession as the problem. Okay. I said completely yes, 100%. I've been problematic for a while. I am problematic. She starts to laugh. I'm pretty pushy when I think there's something wrong. She doesn't have any medical training, though, I point out. Doesn't she worry about the responsibility she'd assumed for her father's treatment? And I said, because in my experience of being ill, I've done a lot of research. And I don't trust doctors, because doctors are just people, right? According to her, they're not just people. This opinion is not uncommon in North America, where surprising numbers regard YouTube as a viable substitute for medical school. Maybe because everyone's sick. Whatever your opinion of Peterson, however, his scrupulous deference to scientific data is indisputable. His public image is defined by scholarly precision. There's no precision. There's no evidence for that, is practically his catchphrase. I am dying to ask him why he submitted to this medical circus. He's cured, for God's sake. Orchestrated by his daughter against his doctor's orders, who wanted to give him ECT when we speak the following day. That's electroconvulsive therapy, by the way. That's zaps to the brain so that you have seizures. I still can't tell if her father will be cogent or incoherent. I don't know what to expect. And Mikhaila will, of course, be monitoring our conversation. Mikhaila, the evil overlord. Peterson is as impeccably groomed, composed, and meticulously courteous as ever when he appears on Zoom a day later. He looks gaunt and pale, though, and I'm struck by an overwhelming sense of his vulnerability. Good time to stab now. As the professor is famously data-driven, I ask what medical evidence was so compelling that it persuaded him to detox in Moscow. This is not what happened. This is what it says. He looks slightly blank. I don't remember anything. From December 16th of 2019 to February 5th, 2020, he says, I don't remember anything at all. He reassures me that he did nonetheless consent to being treated in Moscow. So again, I ask why. Here's the clip.
So you've obviously tried to get treated twice in North America, first on the Eastern Seaboard,
Yeah,
and then in
that
Toronto.
just didn't work at all. Mm-hmm.
Do you even remember much about those two?
I don't remember anything about Toronto. I don't remember anything.
Toronto.
From December 16th to February 5th, of 2020, the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020, I don't remember anything at all.
Do you think did you know that you were flying to Moscow to be put into a coma?
Yeah.
So in real time, you were fully aware of it, but you've got no memory of it now.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm curious about the extent to which his mental health was troubling him in the months and years leading up to the crisis. Crisis as in the side effect from psych meds. So Dad says, well, I don't think it's a mental health issue. I think it's a physical health issue. I have an autoimmune disorder of some sort, and much depression is autoimmune in nature. Now I'm confused all over again. Throughout all his medical ordeals, there wasn't even ever a formal diagnosis of an autoimmune disorder, was there? Yeah, there was, Mikhaila jumps in, because there was. In Russia and in Serbia, fibromyalgia. This isn't an autoimmune condition, is it? You can have blood markers, like inflammatory blood markers, that show autoimmunity, and that can be diagnosed as fibromyalgia. If he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which he really formally wasn't, he was certainly diagnosed with fibromyalgia, although he's okay now, right? This was medication screwing with him. Then he starts talking instead about post-traumatic stress disorder. Can't imagine why. One of the markers for post-traumatic stress disorder is derealization, like when the things around you don't seem real. And I was in a constant state of derealization from October 2016 till January 12th of 2021. Being Jordan Peterson, he explains, has involved 5 years of untold pressure. I was at the epicenter of this incredible controversy, and there were journalists around me constantly and students demonstrating. It's really emotionally hard to be attacked publicly like that, and that happens to me continually for like 3 years. More now, Dad, more. In 2017, 200 of his colleagues signed a petition at the University of Toronto to have me removed from my tenure position, and my faculty association forwarded that to the administration without even notifying me. Dad, you don't have conversations like that. He's talking about people coming up to him on the street, telling him that they've helped him, or that he's helped them. And he says, you don't have conversations like that often outside of the clinical sphere. So part of what's overwhelming to me is how it's direct evidence of how little encouragement so many people get. His face crumbles into tears. They're starving, he breaks down. Sorry, he sobs. I haven't done an interview for a long time. He gets up to leave and returns a minute later carrying a towel to dry his eyes. Okay, that did happen, to be fair. Lucky this interview went so well, or definitely going to be more. Here's the clip.
You don't have conversations like that often outside of the clinical sphere, and you certainly don't have them repeatedly with strangers on the street. But there's something about it that's really remarkably positive, you know. When I walk around well, in any city, in some sense, it's like I'm at home, because where people know me, because people say on the street, they say, well, really nice to see you out. I'm glad that your health is recovering. It's like being surrounded by well-wishers and by friends. And I'm happy about it, because, you know, it's a great thing if you're a clinical psychologist to be able to extend your reach like that. But part of what's overwhelming to me is how it's direct evidence for how little encouragement so many people get. They're starving. Sorry, I haven't done an interview for a long time.
Fine,
Give me one
as
second.
long as you need. Of course. Of course.
And things just fell apart insanely with Tammy. Every day was life and death and crisis for 5 months. The doctor said, well, she's contracted this cancer that's so rare, there's virtually no literature on it, and the 1-year fatality rate is 100%. So endless nights sleeping on the floor in emergency, and continual surgical complications, yes. He looks shell-shocked. So I took benzodiazepines. Those drugs are notoriously addictive, I point out. He had surely heard enough horror stories about housewives hooked on Valium in the 1960s to be wary. No, I really didn't give it a second thought. They were prescribed and I just took them. Here's the actual clip.
Described them by your family doctor. Were you at all worried? Did sort of alarm bells ring about women in the 50s and 60s who got hooked on Valium and couldn't get off it? And
Well, look, when benzodiazepines were first introduced, they were touted as an almost completely safe replacement for barbiturates.
I remember.
So no, I really didn't give it a second thought. What happened was, well, partly I was, you know, my life was an absolute whirlwind at that time.
Maybe they really were the cause of all his problems, which they were. The more he talks, though, the more I wonder whether toxic masculinity might have been a culprit, too. Then she compares him to Donald Trump, because why not? Parallels with Donald Trump come to mind. Another unhappy man closed off from his emotions, projecting strongman mythology while hunkered down in a bunker with his family against the world. Peterson's critics will undoubtedly point out that he built an entire intellectual philosophy upon the principle that life is all about pain and suffering, that the strong, manly response is to square one's shoulders and battle through it, not to take drugs to numb the pain. This was an autoimmune disorder reaction, lady. If you don't, just like, I hope you never experienced that. And so Dad goes, no, I never said that. Look, if you're a viable clinician, you encourage people to take psychiatric medications when it's appropriate. What I really encourage in people is to understand that it isn't useful to allow your suffering to make you resentful. And believe me, I've had plenty of temptation to become resentful about what's happened to me in the last 2 years. There's another thing that actually did happen. When I watched the podcast he made last June with Mikhaila in Belgrade, I'd tell him I thought he looked angry and wonder who or what he was angry with. Well, pain will make you angry, is his response. Is any part of Peterson angry with himself for taking benzodiazepines? He hesitates. I wouldn't say angry, but it's not like I failed to see the irony. That was another thing that continues to make it difficult to stomach, you know? Should I have known better? Possibly. And this is when I stepped in, because should he have known that benzodiazepines can cause akathisia? Nobody knows that, including doctors here. Hopefully they'll know more because we're talking about it. Not that the Times is helping. Mikhaila interrupts sharply. Well, but he continues. I mean, I did do my thesis on alcoholism. She raises her voice and waves her arms. I said, hold up. You had a side effect from a medication. Should you have known better that benzodiazepines can cause akathisia in people who take SSRIs? No, Peterson defers. Enunciating each word, she spells out, this wasn't a benzodiazepine dependency problem. This was an akathisia side effect from psych meds. Yeah, I'm spelling them out because she's so aggravating to talk to. I couldn't help myself. Like, how do I simplify this down more? Her father nods. Yeah, that's right. Mikhaila checks the time. We have to wrap up. He glances up. I'm doing okay, by the way. And I said, yeah, I know, but still. Mostly because I could see how this interview was going to turn out. So then she asked, wasn't it an understandable response to intolerable stress? There's no way akathisia is that, Mikhaila snaps. That's not what I said. Here's what I said.
This is purely just about somebody cracking under the pressure of life. Is that a possibility that you've considered?
Well, there's no doubt that
akathisia is then.
that's right. That's the basic answer to that, is that, like, I didn't develop akathisia until I tried to stop taking the benzodiazepines. So now
Peterson's wife is making a miraculous recovery from cancer. She has recovered. She's fully recovered. She's awesome. His greatest source of stress right now is fear that the akathisia will come back. It's unbearable, and there's always this sense that you could stop it if you just exercise enough willpower, so it's humiliating as well. I guess if you take sound bites from all over the interview, you could get to that. Does it generate a self-punishing voice in his head accusing him of being weak? Yes, definitely. He worries that akathisia must look like weakness to everyone else too. It's certainly how it appears. Grotesque for sure. This is why we're talking about it, because it's so awful. And if people still don't get it, it's a movement disorder side effect from psych meds that doctors are unaware of, even though it hits a number of people. Like a large number of people who take psych meds. You can look it up on Google, akathisia, to see what it looks like. It's people kill themselves when they have it because it hurts so much. So then she talks about him writing a book. It's still cruel and rude. Why didn't he postpone the book until he was better? He did postpone the book. He postponed the book about a year. I can tell you why I did it, as in writing it. This is Dad. I can tell you why I did it, how I could do it. It was easy because the alternative was worse. Not writing the book and staying at home and losing that part of his life as well as being incredibly ill. He'd lost a year to Tammy being ill, then a year to his own illness. If I would have lost the book, I wouldn't have had anything left. I tell him I'm amazed he managed it, and he looks pleased. This woman. This is Dad. So to the degree that I can explain how I was able to manage it, I'm not going to talk about willpower or courage. I'm going to talk about the lesser of two evils. And she ends it with, except, of course, that he has ended up framing his story in terms of his willpower and courage. Okay, so that's the Times article, which is pretty cruel, given the fact that, well, it's so biased. I don't know how you can, as a media source, write something like this and release it as the front cover. And the fact that I was insulted so much. I can't believe a pouting Barbie blonde. There are lip injections, woman. You can get them too. Trump press spokeswoman. Well, anyway, I don't like people suggesting that I'm faking my arthritis. Like, what a fun thing to do as a job. Fake an autoimmune disorder and then come up with a diet to follow that's restrictive and not get paid for it. This just, I don't know. That doesn't seem like a good idea. Anyway. So, thank you for that, Decca Aitkenheld. You can tell by the comments below your article what people think of it. After that, the Daily Mail published, Jordan Peterson claims he was suicidal and hooked on benzodiazepines. After that, New York Post publishes, Jordan Peterson says he was suicidal, addicted to benzos, and has schizophrenia. Then today, the Australian, news.com.au publishes Sense of Doom, Jordan Peterson dishes on severe benzo addiction and schizophrenia. So these news articles are just taking the Times article and rewriting misinformation based on it, and it's really hurting my family. I'm not upset right now, but I was really distraught over the weekend, okay? Because recounting these events is really stressful. Akathisia is not to be taken lightly. My dad's better, but we were trying to put this behind us. Like, he's producing podcasts. We're going to come out with a couple more. Just let it go, and I hope other people don't experience this. And if they do have these symptoms, hopefully they know how to talk to their doctor about it. So then we have a couple of outlets. The Post Millennial, a Canadian outlet, says media outlets falsely claim that Jordan Peterson has schizophrenia. Thank you very much. Blaze Media, Dr. Jordan Peterson's family denies misleading reports that he has schizophrenia. Yes, this is true. You can see the full email Dad wrote linked below. and on his blog about his response to the Times and these news articles. I'll post it up here, but you guys can read it. He just told them he couldn't believe what they were doing. I can't help but be struck by the vast gap between what was offered and the resulting interview, which no reasonable reader could possibly consider celebrating my life and career so far, as indicated by an overwhelming majority of the readers of this piece. And what was done to my daughter, who uprooted her husband and small daughter more than a dozen times to accompany and care for me in 4 countries in the last year, while simultaneously dealing with her own severe health issues, skeptically described by your author, and the near death of her mother, was brutally unfair, callous, and cold. Her illness, thoroughly documented over multiple years at the Toronto Hospital for Sick Children, resulted in the shattering and painful disintegration of her right hip and left ankle, and their surgical replacement of both before she was 17. Technically, I was 17. Anyway, I'm not going to read that because it's making me cry, but he just goes on a rant too. A very well-written, eloquent rant, pointing out how unacceptable this is. Given the manner in which you crafted your invitation to me, I can't understand how you can, in good conscience, accept what has transpired. Sincerely, Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. These stories hurt people. They're lies. I'm fairly resilient, but this made me emotional and very angry, and I couldn't sleep Saturday night. And honestly, if you want to get true information, watch long-form podcasts. For me, watch the podcast I do. Watch the podcast I do with my dad to watch our interactions, to see if I'm this weird, overarching, controlling character or not. Don't take the opinions of some resentful, angrily journalist. Watch my dad and listen to what he says. Not the Times, not BuzzFeed. Directly information from him. If people are worried about dad or my family, please share the video. We need all the help we can get to combat this kind of thing. I've got faith in the power of honesty and the ability in people to see through lies, but sometimes some blunt clarification can help. And I'll see you guys soon in the next podcast I produce, or Dad will see you on his channel, or us together, but we're okay. The article was really upsetting, but it's mainly upsetting because seeing the true malevolence in people is really scary sometimes. Anyway, onwards and upwards, podcasts are coming out. Dad's book is out in March 2nd, and it sold tens of thousands of pre-sales already. That's linked below. I've read it. I think it's better than 12 Rules for Life. And on that note, don't fuck with me. I don't take it lying down. See you around, folks.